we'll go ahead and get started. I hope Kermance and Tiger can join us at some point, but we got plenty to work with here. So welcome everybody to this is episode 5 of Holy Smokes, Cigars and Spirituality. Um, we are doing this via Zoom for obvious reasons. We're in the midst of a pandemic, and our good friend Kervance Ross just joined us. We don't have the full crew today, but we do have a great representation of the team. I'm Christian, the heretic, the host, pastor of the faith community. So I'm going to start off with my introduction of what I'm smoking and what I'm drinking. Today, I got a Grand Habano, vintage 2006. Let me see if I can get it in the screen. Yeah. Tiger gifted this to me, and it's actually a very good smoke. I'm enjoying it. He said it was going to be like very robust and spicy, but it's actually just right for me, so I enjoy it. And then my drink of the day, Michter's Small Batch. Greg and I talked about it a little bit. I'm just drinking this neat today. Up until today, I was calling it Mitchers because I was reading it wrong. But Greg, he corrected me. So I want to go ahead, let everybody who's on today introduce themselves. We're going to start with Karima, then Greg, Myron, and then Kervance. So Karima, take us away.
Hey everybody, my name is Karima Akila. I'm not smoking because I do not do that inside of my house, but do plenty of drinking inside my house indeed. And today, what's this here? It's a Malbec. It's 46. It says it's from Mendoza, Argentina. And it got the name up here, Toenail. You know, the Philly girl in me want to call it Toenail. It might be Tonal, you know, if I want to put some properness on it, Tonal. But I'm going to say it's Toenail today. And I'm going to say I'm drinking 46 Malbec, and I'm so excited to be here with you all one more time in the house of the Lord. Amen.
Yes. Greg.
Hey, everybody. It is good to be back in this great conversation. And I have sad news to report. I'm not sad that I'm teaching a class later this evening, but because I am teaching a class later this evening, in this stainless steel tumbler is water, just plain old-fashioned water. It would like to be a bourbon one day, but that's going to require more processes than just stainless steel. And I'm in my little study area at the house where I'll also be Zooming my class meeting. And I would be in a lot of trouble if I fired up a cigar in the house. So I have a box of Cubans right here just to sort of keep me company. And when the time comes, Monte Cristo and I will get better acquainted. But it is great to be here. Christian, thanks for bringing us together. We're excited.
Absolutely. I love it. I've missed you all a lot, like so much. I can't wait until we can get back together in person. But for today, I'm glad that we have this option. Myron.
Hey folks, I am Myron Randall. I am like the lot here. I am drinking, well, except for Greg, who's not drinking anything. I'm drinking just a Miller Lite because I am at the house. I am not smoking. But I am happy to be with you all, happy to have this conversation. Listen, I miss hanging out with you folks and talking about faith and smoking cigars. So hopefully we will be able to do this in person soon. But listen, I am glad that we are doing this right now via Zoom. So let's do it.
Yes, sir. Don't rush. Don't.
Taking my time. I can't afford to get the Corona. No, not I. Not I. All right.
Don't rush. Kingmaker, what's up?
Glad to see you all. I am leaving the church, headed back home. And what better time to smoke a cigar than after you've left the church? So I am excited to join you all. Forgive the view. I'm in the truck, headed back home. So I'm drinking a protein shake, and I am getting ready to fire up a new favorite, a Macanudo Inspirado. Fell in love with it, came in an order that I placed a couple of weeks ago. Short smoke, but good quality one. So excited to be with you.
Thank you, Kingmaker. Glad you could join us even from the vehicle. And we can't call Curvance's mode of transportation a car because it's much more than a car. It's an experience. You just have to ride around with him one day. He's, everything.
Is that what we're doing? Is that what we're doing?
He's got a computer in there. I mean, it's like a cop, but not a cop.
So Myron, wait a minute. Myron, are you about to allow Daddy Grace to pull you all the way in like that?
What is this Daddy Grace though?
Grace over here. That's
okay.
Don't
let the devil ride. Don't let the devil ride. As the old folks say, Myron, don't let the devil ride. If you let him ride, he'll want to drive. Don't let him ride.
It's quite a car. It's quite a car, is all I'm saying. Quite a car.
I'm just disappointed that you're not drinking your signature beverage today. Signature. Where is Tiger when you need him? Tiger, where are you? We're missing Tiger today. We're missing Nikki and Grayson. So shout out to the three of them. Now, any of them may hop in at any given moment, but for right now, we're missing them. If you're watching this visual episode, you may see a couple of boxes in here which represent people who are not saying anything. That's because they're our producers. So shout out to Cody Cox of Cody Cox Media and Kirkland Halls of XL Tribe for continuing to work with us on this project. So let's see. We got one rule at Holy Smokes. It's very simple. In all of this theological talk, all of this faith talk, our one rule is that we respect each other's lived experience. That's very important when you get together a group of people like us that's so diverse. We have a lot of different lived experiences because we come from different cultures and backgrounds. So it's important that we never lift up our doctrine or our theory over an experience someone has actually lived. So anytime any of us in here are challenged by someone's lived experience, we try to take that as an opportunity to learn from what they have lived. And that's very important to us. So we also normally have a dollar jar. And it keeps us in check because we get people in here that say a lot of big words. And since we're virtual today, we're going to do a virtual dollar jar. And Kirkland, if you can keep track of who needs to put money in the virtual dollar jar, we're going to tally up all of these dollars so that when we get back together in person, you got to ante up. So I'm going to ask Kirkland to keep track of who needs to put $1 in the jar. So, episode 5. Is God transgender? Very provocative. Very provocative. I think once we get into this particular topic, it'll start to make more sense for those who are completely jarred by that concept, like on the surface level. But we really want to explore our perspective of God's gender, because I believe a lot of things get taken for granted when we talk about God's gender, if we even have the conversation. Because when it comes to God's gender, so many things go without saying. It's one of those rules that is doesn't really have to be spoken because it's just accepted at face value. So I want to just ask this question: what is God's gender? And I want to ask Greg to get us started answering the question: what is God's gender? Easy question, Greg.
Man, that is, out of all the questions I get through the years from children and church members, never had that one. But thinking about this, there's two logical responses, and it's going to sound very illogical. The first is, well, of course not. Because when you think about some of the basic Hebrew teaching, or in the Old Testament scriptures, particularly in the Big Ten, right? The 10 Commandments, Exodus 24, where it says, "Don't make any graven images, no idols after me." And so to cast God in the concrete of gendered language seems to literally transgress some of the big teachings, at least in the Judeo-Christian idea of thinking about God. So it's not even transgender, it's gendered, masculine, feminine, transgender. And I'm just going to kind of suspend defining, maybe we can do that later in this group, but defining what we mean by transgender. It's kind of an umbrella term, right? But as psychiatrists use it and psychologists use it. So on the one hand, I said, of course not. You can't make God so small as to create this little box that's going to confine or contain or domesticate God in gendered language or any other language, which is why, again, in the Old Testament, you can't even pronounce the personal name of God, right? We say Yahweh, but we're just filling in vowels where there are none. We don't know that. On the other hand, is God transgendered? Well, of course, absolutely. And I'm not wishing to play games here of contradiction, but one of the scandalous parts of the New Testament is that it dares to imagine a God that trans over our way. You think about the condensation language of Philippians 2, where who, though being in the form of God, did not consider equality with God as something to be grasped, but kenosis, emptied, became one of us, joined with us. Or John chapter 1, the Word became flesh. We need to make God sarxi again. The Greek word, and I'm going to define it, so I don't owe you $1. Don't get me on that. Sarxis, which just simply is the Greek for flesh. God becomes flesh. He takes on our genderedness. Now, we're tempted to think, okay, well, then that's masculine, right? Because Jesus was a man. But no, again, that's domesticating and confining. Now, I will say, confessionally speaking, I was educated in seminary to speak in gender-inclusive language. But the truth is, I still imagine God with masculine pronouns. I can't escape that. That's what formed and fashioned me. I'm blessed and privileged to have a very good relationship with my father, and I grew up without a mom in the household. So this is just where I am, but I'm not about to limit God to that's the only way to talk about God, to put it in that way. And Lord, Christian, there's a lot of ways we could go with that. I'm also thinking about in the developmental disability community, how we also tend to make God, rather when we speak of the Imago Dei, the image of God, which is referenced in Genesis 1, we tend to use intellectual language. Well, then human beings must be like God because of our intellect. But think what we're doing to people with those who have intellectual challenges. And so there's great theologians doing some work like Nancy Iceland, who talks about the disabled God. I mean, this is all the language it sort of speaks of. Well, of course God is not transgender, but of course God is transgender, because we're holding these two things in delightful tension. That's the scandal of it all.
Yeah, that's good. I say it a lot of times. I want to say I say it a lot of times. We had a session on this at the faith community recently, and at the end of it, what I shared is that God is both male and female, and God is neither male or female. So it's just about making God bigger than what we would allow God to be in our own eyes. not necessarily that God needs us to make God bigger, but we need for ourselves to recognize that God is bigger than any category we can place God in. And I think that's the importance of this discussion. But I want to throw it out there. Who else has a thought that they'd like to share on that? Oh, Greg said he wanted to say something else.
Just real quickly, when in that Exodus 20 verse 4, the second commandment where it says not making a graven image, it's really not about wood and stone and the idols, although that's how it's understood in the ancient times. But it's not about wood and stone, but it's about mindset and imagination. When we create the graven image and limit the mindset and imagination, we've just erected another idol that can be controlled and manipulated. And so again, through the gendered language, that's the graven image we must be cautious about. But yeah, appreciate that word, Christian, about with your congregation, is that yes and no. Which is, by the way, wonderful Jewish teaching. That's how the rabbis would teach. It's both. It's allowing the complexity that God deserves, I think.
I think we need to pause right there, though, because you just said out of your mouth, like, that.
Please, can we pause? My goodness.
We have made an idol out of a male God. Like,
that's the beginning of patriarchy, right? Right? It's idleness.
It's idolatry. Like,
yes.
That was good, Greg. This is why Greg is the bearded sage.
It's in the Bible, so I can't take credit.
Oh no!
I hope you teach them that in that class tonight. I don't know what you're talking about, but this is a lecture right here.
See, it's in the Bible, but if you recall from the Watch Your Mouth episode, Kervance used the term exegete, and we made him define it. So what you did is you extracted from the text what everybody can't see.
At this point, if you are looking for a church home, if you're looking for Christ, if you're looking for a community, this would be a great time to join the church, because there's really nothing else to say after what Greg just said. That was amazing.
I want to be a televangelist, so you're trying to get them to join. I'm trying to get you to give. Listen,
Doc,
I'll send your seed right here through Cash App, through PayPal. We'll send you a prayer club. We'll send you some miracle spring water. We'll send you a snippet of Greg's beard. Whatever you need, we're going to send it to you.
that was amazing.
Anybody else? Anybody dare to go after Greg with your thoughts on this?
I'm scared. I mean, that was a lot. The big thing about this is, I would venture to say that God is gender enough that he puts himself inside of something that we embrace as gender, so that we can understand him outside of what he puts himself inside. For me, it is that space where God gets small enough for us to understand him, so that he becomes big enough for us to worship him. And I don't really think he's a gender in totality, but because we are so finite in our thinking, sometimes he becomes what we can understand, which allows God to be inexhaustible, but still puts him in a space where he can be personable. Because like Greg said, he grows up without his mom. I grew up without my dad, but I still see him as a father God. That does not mean that he is not, by saying that to someone who has a horrible relationship with their dad, this could be an insult. This could mess up the relationship that they're trying to develop with God. But in reading and understanding God in the ways that he's been in my life, although I acknowledge him as a father, he's probably been more of a mother than anything else. He's been patient. He's been understanding. He's been nurturing. He's been consoling. And as a father, every time I'm not patient, I'm not nurturing. I'm really matter of fact. So although I acknowledge him as God the Father, I'm grateful that he's God the Mother. Sometimes he's been God the Brother. So in that dynamic, I'm glad we haven't just made him a man. Although you all know that in some dynamics, I refuse to change him to anything else because it'll mess up a lot of good old hymns if I change him to something else. But in the reality, I think God is not one gender. And in his magnanimity, I think he is not a gender at all. I think God is just God. So that's my thought on it.
Thank you, brother. And while Kervance was talking, Tiger Gibson joined us. My guy, Tiger.
Hello, everyone.
I'm smoking the Grand Habano today. I'm loving it.
Do you?
Yeah.
I had one. I had one 2 days ago, and it gets spicy at the end, and the flavor changes. It's pretty good.
I'm enjoying it thus far. So to catch you up, we just asked the question, what is God's gender? And Greg took us on a journey through the scriptures that forever changed our lives. And Kervance followed that up. So we still haven't heard from Myron, Karima, and now Tiger on that. So I would love to hear what any of you has to say.
Well, I'll catch up on what they said because I subscribe to Patreon. So
yeah, you got it.
I'll
have
be
a
able
Patreon
to
subscription to get
I'll
it
be
all.
I'll be able to see it.
Yes, sir. Yes,
well,
sir.
on that note, as the only female on this here situation, I'm gonna hop in right here.
Bring it for the ladies.
Thanks so much. The very first time that I think I had this this thought brush up against my traditional patriarchal mindset was when I stepped outside of my traditional church, and I went to visit a sister who practiced a different spirituality. And she said, let's begin with prayer. It was for a consultation. And when she began to pray, she said, Mother, Father, God. And I was like, okay, Mother, Father, God. That's new. You know, I had never experienced that before. Coming from a good, you know, traditional Baptist experience, there was no Mother, Father, God. You know, it was Father God in the name of Jesus, you know, that type of thing. We ain't had no Mother, Father, God. So, you know, I listen.
Let me drop something real quick. Because based on what you just said, my primary concern wouldn't have been the use of mother. It sounded like she was saying something else. Like mother
like, something else.
Almost, yeah, like, wait a minute now. You can't talk about my God like that.
In the middle of prayer, I had to
appreciate it.
One eye like this to see, make sure everything was still cool. You know what I'm saying? I know we was about to get to, you know, fighting in the middle of the prayer. I ain't know. You know, the Philly girl in me, when I hear certain words, you know what I'm saying, that's time to pop off earrings and, you know, get the Vaseline. But all right. So, you know, I muscled through that. So that was the first time that anyone had ever prayed like that before. And so afterwards, you know, I asked her about that. And in her spirituality, it was, if we understand that God is creator of all things, and if we understand the nature of creation, that in order for creation to multiply itself, that it is built within it the idea of multiplicity, which has to have both male and female components in order for there to be forward progression in any type of life form. And so for her, it was very easy for her to understand that within God, that there exists both male and female. And that within God creating the world, that the female side of God came out and did the female part. The male side of God came out and did the male part. That's why we have what we have. And that's why it is built within the very structure. So that was the first time that I was ever challenged with something like that. And that wasn't that long ago. Let me just say that. And as a result of that conversation, it has caused me to pay attention to this patriarchal society that we have, and just how invasive it is, and just how indoctrinated we all are. And so even in preparation for this talk, when I read certain websites that, check this, that agreed that God could be both male and female, or even the sites that agreed that God was more female, even in their pronouns, come here, Grayson, which are he, him, his, all right. Even in their pronouns and their description of God, it was always referred to as he. So I found personally, while it be cumbersome, because you got to use, some extra words, and you cannot use those pronouns of he or she, but I found, even in my own prayer language, and even as I refer to God, to refer to God as just God, not he, not him. And even I've kind of personally backed away from the father component. Not to any, I don't have daddy issues, got a great relationship with my dad, grew up with my mother and my father. But just to understand that we need not limit this entity, this being, this source. And that is the word that I have recently used to describe God, which is source. To me, that embodies all of it, male and female, source.
Lovely. I think that just kind of goes to show that the work of patriarchy is not just effective with men, but it is just as effective in indoctrinating women to believe that God can only be father and God can only be man.
It's most detrimental, is what it is.
Yes, absolutely. Because there's this notion that if God is anything other, then it makes God less. And I frequently challenge people by saying, if you are offended when I refer to God in feminine ways, that doesn't tell me what you think about God. That tells me what you think about women. And that's the conversation that we need to have. Why are you so offended when we talk about God in feminine ways? Because God is cool with that, right? But tell me what you think about women.
That's correct.
And why that's so offensive to you when I refer to the God that I serve in feminine terms.
That's right.
So, yeah, it's something that we got to constantly be thinking about. Yeah. Myron, Tiger, y'all got anything?
Yeah, can I address, I think, which is the big elephant in the room, right? And I think the elephant in the room is Jesus, right? Because Jesus is incarnated as male. And so whenever we have conversations about the gender of God, people go, but what about Jesus? Jesus was a man. And yes, Jesus was incarnated as a man, but it's important to realize that Jesus comes into a particular context and into a particular culture and has to be a man, if you would, to accomplish his particular purpose, right? So the scriptures through the Old Testament prophesy about this guy who's going to take up the throne of David. Well, in order to be a king in that culture and in that context, you had to be a male. So for Jesus to accomplish the purposes of God, if you would, he is incarnated. I don't want to say manifested. That is all kind of problems in and of itself. But he's incarnated as a male. But one of the interesting things about Jesus is this, that even though he's incarnated as a male, he refers to himself oftentimes in the feminine context. There's one particular passage where he says, "O Israel, I long to gather you like a mother hen." He calls himself a mother hen. Jesus, you're a man, but you're referring to yourself as a mother hen. In the book of Matthew, Matthew refers to him as wisdom. The word Sophia in Greek, which is in Greek, it's a feminine term. And then he kind of equates him to the wisdom talked about in the book of Proverbs, which is always referred to in the feminine. Side note, I'm coming back to this topic. Side note, I just found out that in the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament, whenever he's talking about a woman, he's talking about wisdom. So there is no Proverbs 31 woman. It's wisdom. Side note, I just thought I'd share that. But nonetheless, it's a feminine term. So Jesus is referred to as the wisdom of God, that he is in that feminine sense. And then when you look at Jesus's ministry, he often gives so much privilege to women that other people look at him and judge him for the privilege and the access that he gives to women. So I think it's important to talk about Jesus and to look at the fact that he paves the way for women and gives access to women when other folks don't do that, and that he refers to himself in the feminine sense.
Correct.
Are you saying that based off of that revelation you just gave us, that Proverbs is the book of women?
It's a book about women, but it's a book about wisdom.
So this adds a whole different light to this. I must say though, in a close, from a hooping standpoint, saying he comes off so much better. It just it has more effect to it when I say he's all I need. I'm sorry, but the reality is, I don't think we embrace in this patriarchal book, as well as in our patriarchal cultural history from the beginning of time, the beauty of and the power of women. And if we don't start really embracing how powerful women really are, it minimizes how powerful God really is. And I think that changes this, even in the colloquial standpoint. When we are wanting to insult a man, we don't call him the male genitalia, we call him the female genitalia. And I don't know anything tougher than female genitalia. Nothing bounces back with the ability to have the integrity as the female genitalia.
Karima, right?
What? I missed anything. Right? I'm being honest. So
is going in right now.
I mean, but when you think about it, if you're calling a man the female genitalia, you're really saying he's tough. You're not saying that he's weak.
Shit, that's what you're saying. I done had 6 of them, trust me.
Yeah. So I think,
you understand?
yeah, I think, yeah, as we're talking about this is an indictment on us as men, more than this is an indictment on God, that we really just don't respect the power of women. And if we did, we would probably never call God a man ever again.
Well, think about it. So in the Genesis language, God's the creator. God is the one that births the universe into existence, births the world into existence, births Adam, the Hebrew for man, for humankind, births into existence. So it's these birthing narratives. And I was raised on a farm, and I've observed a lot of cows birthing. I've never observed one bull giving birth. No, not one bull. So I mean, you're right, Cravance. It's a beautiful, poetic, but literal way of speaking of the sheer creative power of Yahweh, of God, this one who births us into being. And all that God asks of us is, now you go birth something into being that's generative and good.
That's good, Greg. If you think about it, even in the New Testament, when Jesus tells Nicodemus, you've got to be born again, right? It's birth language. Yeah.
Boom.
Man, y'all giving me all kind of revelation on this. This is
Tiger, you got
this is different.
Yeah,
I love this.
It don't have much to do with God. I just want to point it out that when Curvant said it is the most toughest genitalia, Karima said, snap back. I don't know. Wait. I don't know if that's what she said, but she came on and said, I had 6 kids and it is back. So, Yes.
I wish we were in the cigar lounge. There's a lot of ways we could go with this.
Yes. So I don't want to derail it, but I do want to say, as far as gender, I respect everyone. Whatever you feel like you need to say. To me, he is God. And that's where I've always left it at. I never got into the back and forth of who and what God is to other people. But I always thought about when the Bible says, and he created man in his own image, he ended up creating them. So there could be one or the other, or the duality there. I'm sure God isn't tripping over the duality either, but I find it funny how sometimes people like to invoke their own things or their own issues. I think Kervance or Myron brought up a good point about what do you think about women? Maybe that's what the issue is. And we always like to toss it and throw God in there instead of just addressing really what it is that we want to address. So in short, to me, it doesn't matter. God is good, and I appreciate him. And I am grateful for all of the women who have had multiple children and had the ability to snap back.
Praise the Lord.
You have to do these hand motions with a tiger. That's what makes it.
Well, see, the key is if you want to see the hand motions, you got to go to the Patreon account. So
That's right.
You want to see on here. So if you hear my voice and you're not looking at the video, first of all, you want to see which woman is snapping back, all right? And you want to see what I'm doing with my hands. And through this COVID-19 of us not shaving, Kervance still has a perfect mustache. Still, people. He's undefeated.
That's right. No corona gonna get him down. None.
Oh no, Kervance gonna stay fly.
I rebuke corona in the name of Mother God. Right now, Jesus.
You know what?
Where did Christian go?
Back to the subject, though. I mean, not that we're all subject, but you think about it. God's, at least in the Christian, in the scandal of Christian teaching, God's identity is rooted with us, scars and all. So regardless of the gendered language, God has chosen, and that's using the Philippian passage of emptying, the kenosis, but it's choosing an identity with us. It's always going to be flawed, which opens a whole nother door open to what does the flawedness of God look like? What does the, Nancy Iceland has the language, the disabled God. What does that look like? Because God's choosing the flawed metaphors, the flawed language, the flawed sexual identities, the binary language, and the non-binary language. God enters into those spaces. Roberta Bondi, a retired theologian with another school in Atlanta, which will remain nameless, she speaks about the resurrection, that his resurrection comes scars and all. And I think that's a perfect image of this transcendent God who's chosen eminence with us. Scars, and hey, to women who have the privilege of birthing children. My wife is a wonderful mom, so she bears those scars that I can't bear for her. My children can't bear those scars. All she can do is bear those scars. So to me, it's just, we're missing out on so many fabulous ways of accessing the transcendent God by blocking off these images or saying these images are not allowed. To Tiger's point, I think it says more about us and our issues than it does about the bigness of God. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. My apologies.
I want to add to that. When you said that, I thought of Augustine, and I don't even really like Augustine that much. But Augustine says, right, if it is understood, then that which is understood is not God. right? This idea that if you have a comprehensive understanding of it, that's probably not God that you have understood.
Wait, say that one more time, Myron. Break
No,
it
here
down
is
one more
Augustine.
time.
Augustine says, if it is understood, then that which is understood is probably not God. Right? If you have the ability to comprehensively understand your deity, then that deity you comprehensively understand is probably not the God of creation.
Okay.
It's too easy.
It's too easy. You got it.
I didn't plan on going here, but that's a great segue to humanity's need for certainty. So if we take the Augustine phrase about if you can understand it, it no longer becomes God. How do we hold that intention with humanity's need for certainty? That's why theology is even a thing, in my opinion. We're trying to answer the great question, right? We're trying to answer the questions that are not obvious around us, because when we deal with the concept of our finite existence, we're not here forever. We're trying to figure out, what does life look like even after we leave this place? We come to this God talk to try to answer those questions that are not certain. So how do we hold that? Because the certainty of God as male makes people very comfortable. And when you disrupt that certainty, you tend to disrupt people's whole perspective of who God is. So how do we find that balance? That's a real question. I want y'all to answer.
I would say that what we consider certain itself, the definition of what we call as certain, needs to be evaluated. Because the only reason why it rubs you the wrong way is because somewhere along the way, from the beginning of time until now, we have said we hold these truths to be self-evident. We hold these things to be true. We hold these things to be certain. And it is just a matter of time, and we are in that time right now, where a group of people have said that they are not. Where enough of us have said it is not certain. So I think that in order to better answer that question, we need to debunk the very thing that we called certain to begin with. It never should have been. It never should have been from the jump.
So basically, it's a matter of, to me, it sounds like a matter of spiritual maturity. If your faith requires certainty, then it's not really faith to begin with, because embedded in the concept of faith is doubt. Faith is birthed out of doubt. I need to have faith in something because of my lack of certainty. If there was certainty, I wouldn't need faith. So I think if we start to consider that more frequently, it might help us with this discussion. Greg, you look like you got something to say.
Yeah, well, I was thinking too, it parallels, I think, too, with our uncertainty, our discomfort with uncertainty with gender, right? Because again, we tend to think of gender exclusively in binary categories. You're either male or female. But the truth is, science is saying it's not that simple. You know, anatomically speaking, it's not that simple. Chromosomally speaking, that's not even a word. That's not clear. There's a lot of and I'm not implying empty-minded relativism. The phrase disorders of sexual development is something that's very real. But that's part of the national or international conversation we're now having. So there's not even certainty when we begin to talk about, well, what is there a maleness? Is there a femaleness? Is there transgenderness? You know, what does all this mean? So it points to the complexity of the human condition, which if that's just a mere reflection of the complexity of the God condition, absolutely, we're going to be limited every step of the way. And I'm okay with that, because I think God deserves that kind of complexity, right? That kind of not even nuance, but when you think about language, that's why much of the Bible is written in poetry. Poetry is intended to be explosive language. You can't flatten God out with prose. Instead, you've got to use evocative language. And so you use gendered terms, you use culturally imbued terms, you use terms that we still don't know what it means. It's just kind of out there. And so we're allowed from one generation to the next to go, wow, what is that about? And I hate to say what I'm about to say, I got to sign off. I've got a class I'm about to teach. And you guys, and I mean that in a gender inclusive way, you guys, I love y'all. Love what Holy Smokes is about. Christian, thank you for your leadership. You're going to keep the dialogue going, but I need to back out. But hey, Tiger, I am a patron member, so I get to watch the rest of this. I'm excited about that. Peace,
Yes,
love.
Thank you so much, Greg. Appreciate your input in this conversation. Before I even pivot, does anybody have anything they want to say in response to that, what Greg just shared? Okay, cool. So here's my thought, right? The gender topic is like a box that we put God in. And I am not one of those people that suggests God isn't in the box. I believe that God is in the box. I met God in a box of patriarchy. And I had a real experience of divine power in a box of patriarchy. I think the challenge here is not to get people to stop identifying with God as He, but recognize that the box does not limit God. That God can be in your box, and God can be in somebody else's box, and God could be in another person's box, and be outside of all of those boxes at the same time, is what I believe we need to start to wrestle with when it comes to this gender identity of God. And for those who are still wondering, what do we mean by transgender? Transgender just literally means, as a word, someone who transcends gender. It's literally what it means. So we're not talking about genitalia. We're just talking about somebody who transcends gender. And if we have a God that we can limit to a gender category, that God isn't big enough for me. So I want y'all to help me out as we start to wrap this thing up. What is the danger to the church and to Christians if we break open that box of gender? What would happen if the church decided to break open that box? Kingmaker.
I think that what will happen is once you begin to pull on a thread, you begin to unravel some things. And this is what happened in my experience. You know, as I began to allow myself to see God larger than my little Black Baptist box, you know, allowed me to experience God, that began to pull on a thread. And because it's all built upon each other. And the minute that you began pulling on that thread, then things began to unravel. And it feels like the rug is pulled out from underneath you. So the reason why we here in the Western Christian church, and the evangelical church, the church that I came out of most recently, the reason why we will not tiptoe into these areas or, you know, beat the hornet's nest of this topic and others like it is because it pulls at the very root of what we know to be absolutely true. You know, there's that absolute truth that is necessary in order for us to build everything else on top of. And so when you begin to pull, it's like playing a game of Jenga, right? When you begin to pull one of them blocks out, you know, you're trying to balance it here and figure out, okay, if I'm going to say that God is neither male nor female, then what does that mean about, actual scripture? And then if the men who actually wrote the book had to use such pronouns and such figurative language because of the time that they were in, then what else did they have to do? Or what else could they not put in? Or what else did they have to leave out? And so it begins to start this little rabbit hole trail, and we are really afraid to see how far the rabbit trail goes. Because I think at the end of it, we're scared that the thing that we thought that we needed, that it's not going to be what we thought what it is. It's like going to, the Wiz, not the Wizard of Oz, because I'm Black, the Wiz. Okay? And, finally seeing Richard Pryor, behind the curtain. And you're going to be like, Richard Pryor, like, what you doing back there, man? So it's that idea. It's the fear of it not being what we thought it was, and it being God being something completely different than the box that we put him in. So in essence, the church is scared.
So you're saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm going to tell you what I feel like I heard, that the fabric of our faith expression is built on patriarchy.
Absolutely.
And if we start to unravel it, the substance and the foundation of a lot of the stuff we thought we knew will crumble before our very eyes.
You better say it.
Oh, okay.
Indeed.
I just wanted to make sure I understood what you were saying.
Yep, you got it right.
Myron Kravach, I got to ask something on this.
You know what I think happens? I think it shakes the power structure. That for so long, people have garnered power by patriarchy, just by their gender and their sex. And when we begin to look at God as comprehensive, you can no longer say that your power comes from your gender or your sex, right? So it shakes the power structure infinitely. And so people who had power no longer have power, and it flattens out the power structure, which then makes people very, very nervous.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it will force us, kind of dovetailing on both Myron and Karima, to evaluate every passage that we've preached about for the last 2,000 years, because it will force us to do some really integral exegetical recanting, because a lot of what we've done is to show God as this hateful, this angry, this vindictive, this power-hungry individual. And when you start realizing that he's more feminine than he is masculine, or even giving him the due power of being a woman, most of what we've said in biblical dynamics to Western followers, we're forced to be able to say we lied, or we implied, or we read into it. And it will force us to have to, in most denominations, sit men down and put women in power. Which would cause a lot of issues, because we've stated, particularly when we're talking about Paul, separating the men on one side and the women on the other. When we talked about these passages, when we're saying that husbands, submit yourselves to your wives, submit yourselves to your husbands, you will now have to reevaluate how you exegeted it to be able to put women in check, when really, if you start looking at God as a transgender, it will force you to put your ego in check and start respecting the voice of your wife, to start respecting the voice of your mothers, to start listening to God more intently, as opposed to disregarding his words because he was speaking in his feminine power, but your masculine ear caused you to be deaf to his words. So it would just shake up this whole process, and I don't think we want to do that.
I totally agree with you. I do need to make a note that Kirkland says you owe $2 in the dollar jar. There
For what?
There was a little statement there. You said integral exegetical recanting.
I've already explained exegetical 2 episodes ago. Integral is not a big word, and recant is not a big word either.
I know,
So
but when
because
you
I've
string
already,
them together,
come on, man, recant. Come on, for real, y'all serious?
but when you say
That's not fair.
recanting
Come on,
after integral exegetical, like,
integral and recant are basic words. Myron, come on, seriously? Unmute yourself, Myron. This ain't the time to be muted.
I agree with Curvance on this one. I feel like those are basic
Thank
words.
you.
I gotta be honest.
Yes.
I gotta be honest.
I can't trust y'all with the extent of your vocabularies that's an okay statement to make. I didn't understand it, and I'm a pretty smart guy.
Did we not cover?
Means?
You actually said it 20 minutes ago that Kurt Vance used the word exegetical 2 episodes ago. We've defined it already. This is a comprehensive session, and if you are a member of Patreon and you paid your $30, you can go back 2 episodes and saw that I put my $2 in there, and I don't go back on words that we've already defined. If this is a problem for you, that means you're not a member. This is a good time to become a member.
Of the Patreon.
And I want to say,
vocabulary list.
Yes.
I want to say, being a Patreon doesn't require you to spend $30. It's actually
it
$5
does. No, you got to spend $30. You got to spend $30. You got to spend $30. $5 during Corona is not an option. It's delivery fees. We got delivery fees.
So
we want you to get the T-shirt and everything. So spend the $30.
Yeah, you get the 30, you get the T-shirt, you get cigars, you get a drink, you get all of that stuff. The $5 is gonna open you up to all of the content that is exclusively on Patreon. So thank you both for bringing that up. So I think, first of all, everybody has provided some great input, and I'm gonna hand it over to Karima to kind of close us out. But I think it's important, for me at least right here, to say, if you refer to God in masculine terms, that's fine. Nobody in this particular setting is trying to convince you it's wrong to refer to God in masculine terms. I met God in a box of patriarchy. I've always referred to God as he and him. There's nothing wrong with that. Also, if you refer to God in feminine terms, there's nothing wrong with that as well. The problem is when we take our perspective of God and dictate it to everybody else. Sorry, I'm on the patio if y'all heard that background noise. The problem is when we take our view of God and say everybody else has to fall in line with my personal view of God or with my faith tradition's view of God. And if you can't get with that, then you're outside of the will of God. That's where the problem comes in. So even at my church, over the past couple of years, we've been working around this whole concept of a transgender God who literally transcends gender. So I'm not trying to get my members who refer to God as he to stop. I'm trying to make room for my members who also recognize God as she. And for some of those members, the feminine identification of God is what helps them to connect to God even better. And I'm not going to allow my patriarchal box to hinder them from getting closer to God, which is what I think we've been doing for a long time. So I want to say that, and then if Myron or Vance have anything you want to add, you can add it, and then we're going to hand it over to Karima to close us out. After this great episode.
I rest.
Okay.
I just want to thank you for always giving us these challenging topics. And I'm hoping that as people are watching us, they realize that we're not creating definite perspectives at all. We're just creating an opportunity for people to think more than they normally think. And within that, it allows us to reach a group of people that we've been called to reach. If you don't agree with us, please don't kill us for thinking, for seeing God bigger. But what we do, much like smoking cigars, drinking bourbon or Hennessy or whatever we drink, people are getting saved simply because we present a platform that poses a perspective that we've shut down. So to you, the faith community, McAfee School of Theology, and those who tune in to us, thank you for allowing us to be free to think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Karima, close us out.
First of all, it is just such an honor to be on this platform, such an honor to, Holy Smokes is just so radical. And I wonder sometimes if that in and of itself is the problem, you know, that it shouldn't be radical. Just like this discussion shouldn't be something disruptive. And that's what I want to close out with. 3 things. Number 1, I love being a woman. I absolutely love it. I didn't always. It took me birthing people into this world in order to understand extremely how powerful the nature of a woman is, that I have within me the capability to grow life. And I have the capability to allow life, because I don't have to allow life to come, but I have the capability and the power to allow life to be. And that in and of itself is just beautiful. The other part that comes with being woman, I love that passage that you said, who said that? Myron said that about the book of Proverbs and how, you know, in more Gnostic terms, wisdom is referred to in a woman's term as Sophia. I love that because I feel like that is one of the greatest gifts as being a woman, is to understand wisdom and to understand, you know, the whole nature of a woman is to move things forward. We move creation forward. Our mere physiology allows us to do that. And so in all things, the nature of a woman is called workability. What do I have to do in order to get this thing to work? What must I do in order to move this from point A to point B? And the nature of a woman says, whatever I have to do, be it sacrifice myself, be it whatever, in order to move this thing from point A to point B, that's what I'll do. And so if we were to understand that God embodies all of our genders, then I would dare to say that it is the female portion of God, that wisdom portion that said, they need me to come as Jesus, and they need Jesus to be a male, no problem. Because I know that I just need you to hear my message. I don't really care what has to happen in order for you to hear it. It's all about workability. It's all about progression and moving this thing forward. And I understand what my greater mission is. So that means, if that means that I need to come as a male, then okay, then that's what we're going to do. If that means that, you know, when I was a wife before my husband passed, if I needed to say something, but in order for him to hear it, I needed to fix him a plate. Come on, somebody. Put some gravy on the rice. You know what I'm saying? If that meant that I need to do what I needed to do at nighttime, all right.
Talk about it.
And to hear me. And again, it's not hearing me, it's hearing truth, so that we can move something forward. I don't give a good damn whether or not it comes from my voice. Matter of fact, I used to pray, God, please let it come from a billboard, let him hear it on a commercial. I don't care if he get a text message, but this is truth that he needs to hear. And if he is supposed to be the Godhead of this family and all of that, then, and if he needs to hear it in order for it to flow down to the rest of us, then let him hear it however he needs to. And whatever I got to do in order to move truth forward is what I'm going to do. So I see that as the wisdom and the beauty and the power of being female. And I see God embodying all of that. Number 2, you know, this whole conversation just has me wanting to study the history of this patriarchal society that we have. Like, how did this whole thing start? And did it start because of the physical nature of a man, that in most cases, and traditionally speaking, the physiology of a man means that they may be physically stronger than a woman. And therefore, if I can dominate someone else physically, then I'm more important, I'm stronger, I'm more intelligent? Did it start back then? Is that how it started? So I want to research that, and I invite our listeners to do the same. And then finally, and this is the bigger piece, and Christian, it ties into what you just said. Why does it bother you? That's the question to ask yourself. Why does it bother you? And so, like I told you, when I was at that little meeting and that woman began with Mother, Father, God, I had to stop and say, okay, wait a minute, I am a woman. Why is it bothering me that she's using those terms? And then where did I get that from? Who told me that this was wrong? Oh, this man over here told me that this was wrong. And this man referred to scripture, patches in the Bible that would explain that this was wrong. Well, then who wrote this Bible? Okay, these were men that wrote this Bible. Am I seeing a correlation? So, for anyone that this rubs you the wrong way, I would just invite you to sit with yourself long enough and be courageous enough to examine yourself. So let a man examine himself, and figure out where inside of you does this rub you the wrong way, and why? And what would happen if you were to think, what would God think if you were to refer to God as she, as Mother God? Do you think God would have a problem with that? And if so, why? And examine that. So this was a wonderful conversation. I see this time, this 2020 year, as being powerful, powerful. This is a time in creation like none other, when I see, okay, let me put it in female terms, the womb is ripe. It is ready for implantation, and it is ready for something to be birthed and to be born. And it takes those of us who have the seed of truth in order to implant it into this very rich, nutrient-rich environment that we're in right now, in order for this type of thinking to be birthed and born in the people during this time. So Christian, thank you so much for this opportunity to share in this space. And thank you, all of you, for your words and your thoughts, and for examining yourselves as I've had to examine myself.
Karima, thank you so much. I think you said so much right there that people need to sit with and probably rewind this and listen to what you said all over again, just to process it all. And I'm grateful for women like you and Nikki Hardiman, who couldn't be a part of this episode, and then the women that come to our monthly gathering, because I believe a lot of the power in what we do as Holy Smokes is we have settings where men sit and listen and learn from the women, which I believe is something that's missing in a lot of our spaces. So thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for pouring into us. Thank you for teaching us. Thank you to everybody who was a part of this episode. Thank you for listening to this episode. It's Holy Smokes, Cigars and Spirituality. Is God transgender? I hope we did what we could to respond to that. And we'll see you next time right here. Peace out.
Hey family, I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. Now here's what I need you to do. Share this with somebody that you love, whether it be your parents, your siblings, your spouse, your friends at work, your pastor. Share it with somebody. Spread this goodness as far as you possibly can. And then also, thank you again for supporting us on Patreon. We're going to continue to bring you as much content as we possibly can. So, if you have any ideas for topics that you would like for us to cover in future episodes, please send those to us. You can message us on Patreon. You can also hit up our DMs on Instagram. That's at Holy Smokes Movement. Or you can shoot us an email at holysmokes@thefaithcommunity.org. Thanks again, and we hope to see you next time right here on Holy Smokes, Cigars and Spirituality.